So Boonboomger just ended, and there is no better time to talk about it but now. There's a lot to talk about, so let's just get straight into it. Now, this season had a lot to live up to, given that it came out immediately after the absolute cinema that was King-Ohger. And of course, right from the start, there was a glaring issue being the suits. Unlike previous Sentais, this one just decides to slap a big giant tire right on their face and call it a day. Now, obviously, we've all grown past this since then, but at the time, this was a very jarring issue. But one thing that I did appreciate about the show early on is that it even plays into the whole idea of these suits being weird, since the entire population refers to them as tired people. But anyways, enough about the suits, let's get into the show itself. Right off the bat, I'm gonna say Boonboomger is good. I think the show brought back more of a normal Sentai vibe that most fans are used to. While I'd argue that Boonboomger for the most part is very episodic compared to previous Sentais, it does contain its stories into arcs, or as they dub them, laps. Now, while some laps are better than the others, there's still some pretty good episodes for every single team member for the most part in each of them. But speaking of the characters, I think this team is one where I think that for the most part, I love every single member on this team. They all do an amazing job working together, and it's just a blast seeing them interact. Starting off with Talia, I think Talia was an alright red. He wasn't anything to write home about compared to Momoi or Gira, but I think he still was an alright leader and really held the team together. And it was really evident when Boomie's death happened. Like, there was a clear tonal shift that told you that he was the glue that held this team together. And I really loved how his dream was to allow kids to keep on dreaming and smile. While it's a simple dream, it still fits his backstory that he had as a kid with hearing a child scream through the walls. Which, by the way, can we just talk about how dark that is for a kid's show? Like, I was shocked when I saw this scene, like, they went the whole mile with it too. And I think the reveal of his dream was perfectly placed since it gave the team a way to comfort him and use it towards the end game. Now, I do wish that they did explore it a little bit more, but I know that it's a sensitive topic, so I understand. But I do think that his childhood dream to be a firefighter was kind of thrown out the window midway through the season for no apparent reason, which is a real shame because that suit was kind of fire and allowed for some interesting fight scenes. And on the topic of Boon 119, we really didn't get a team power up for each one of the team members using that method. And they even teased us too with Boon Black and Boon Blue getting one in a dream sequence. Like, honestly, seeing those made me want them. But I think it's okay since the champion suits are absolutely fire and are a way better power up. Moving on to Chashiro, I think Isiro was a cool character to try to figure out. And he did an amazing job playing a double agent towards the end of the series. Like, bro pulled out his gun and shot at his teammates not only once, but twice. But on the topic of this portrayal, I feel like this plotline was thrown around a bunch of times throughout the series. Albeit one of them was a clone of him, which actually created a really cool fight scene. Now, you could see this as foreshadowing for his eventual betrayal, but I think it kind of lessened the damage there. But overall, I think it was very interesting to see a spy as a main ranger, and it definitely made for some interesting episodes. Such as him and Sakito spying and breaking into the Hashilian and Isa headquarters, and learning what the two parties were up to. But not only that, it allowed for comedic moments, such as when Joe first joins the team, and he's very sus of him. And I know I made comments about if his actions were redeemable, but I think considering he was a double agent, he is 100% redeemable. But moving on, we have Boon Pink. I found Mira to be one of my favorite characters in the show. I loved how at first she was a little bit ditzy, which eventually allowed her to grow into the character we see today. And I found it really interesting that they brought back her ex-fiance and made his return actually show how much her character has grown. And of course, it still shows off her goofy side in the episode. I also felt like she played a similar role to Talia, as sort of the glue that held the team together. For example, when Gimbal wanted to leave the team, she was the first one to want to keep him and fight alongside him. Alongside when Boonie died and Talia was heartbroken trying to keep the alien alive, she was the first to call him out and tried to comfort him. I also found her working multiple jobs to be kinda interesting as it allowed the team to interact with different people and change people's lives for the better. For example, her boss that owned a restaurant and her Toys R Us co-worker, aka Flint. At the end of the day, I don't think there was a moment in this series where she wasn't smiling. Mira at the end of the day loved being a Boonboomger and embraced it in and outside of the suit. But up next we have my personal favorite being Boon Black. Joe was honestly my favorite as soon as he debuted in the show. Like, his debut was just absolute fire. Like, you cannot tell me that that henshin went hard. And when it was a Joe focus episode, you knew it was going to be peak. And I mean, the dude just loved protecting innocent lives no matter what, and even quit his job to live by his standards. The moment that sold me on Joe being my favorite Boonboomger was when he protected an innocent T-Rex monster and created a bond with this thing, and he made sure to protect this thing with his life. But when the villains took control of the thing, he was heartbroken but knew he had to put it down. And if I haven't proved to you just how much I love Joe yet, when Gimba left the team temporarily, he decided he was going to fight for not only his worth, but for Gimba's worth too. And hell, Chashiro even said he was the best representation of what a hero is. And he really did embrace that title. He is literally the embodiment of what a Sentai character should be. But moving on, we have Boon Orange. I think Gimba was the most interesting character and maybe the most zesty character in the show. Right from the get-go, you could tell that Gimba was very secretive about his past and somehow was always at the right place and at the right time. But all this came to a head when Disrace showed up and revealed his true identity. Which honestly, this shaked up everything. Our team quickly became a dysfunctional team with Gimba not wanting to drag others into his past affairs. And I think his arc of being a lone hero was actually the coolest part of the entirety of Boonboomger. During his time as a lone hero, he would repeatedly get into it with his teammates who were just trying to help him. But he was intent on beating Disrace by himself in order to free his father. But not only that, he repeatedly took on Disrace and kept on getting his ass whooped till finally Sakito and Akira talked some sense to him. One with brute force and the other with actual personal experience of being a lone hero. And I really loved how his departure was the reason we got Champion Boonboomger. And it really allowed for his triumphant return to be a major milestone for the team. But with the Hashilians gone, I hope that they quickly release my boy's dad, and possibly we get to see his kingdom. But moving on to our last team member, we have Boon Violet. Now I'm not gonna lie, Sakito was the one team member I wanted to know more about. He really did get the least amount of screen time in the show. And the thing is, his suit is fire and his fight scenes were always peak. And honestly, it felt like he was never part of the team till the very end. And in almost every single major fight, he was never a part of the group transformation. However, he did take out Cannonberg, so I guess that was a huge win for him. Though I really do wish that they explored his past a little bit more, since he did end up leaving Earth. And I imagine there's a little bit more to that backstory other than you have nothing to look forward to here. And I also don't like that he didn't get a proper champion jacket in the show. I imagine this will be a stage show exclusive thing, which is kind of disappointing, but I mean, it's a stage show, they gotta bring people in somehow. But thankfully, he did get to use a champion jacket alongside Gimba to take out a soccer monster. Which is very interesting since both of their actors are really into soccer and even went to a soccer game dressed as the Boonboomgers. But I think having Sakito stay behind while the team goes to compete in the BBG is very poetic in a sense. Since he was the boy who left Earth for 10 years to come back and protect the place that was deemed to have nothing for him. But we also need to talk about our honorary Boonboonger, Shirabe. Shirabe is honestly the GOAT of the series. She was the one who risked her life to save the team literally, as well as she essentially worked as a double agent for the team, gathering information for the team. And it's a real disappointment that they didn't let her become a Boonboomger. And it's not like there weren't any other changers, there was literally 3 shown on screen. But her crush on Boonie was adorable, and in the end, she was the winner in all of this. She became the director of ISA and got a big giant hug from Boonie. And I know I would get flack for this if I didn't talk about Boonie and Boonie. Boonie was a character who really didn't have much to write home about. But that was till Disrace dropped a massive bombshell that he knew Spender and worked for him, which obviously infuriated Boonie. So much so that he no longer wanted to work with him, and it took Sakito sending his changers audio to allow him to hear the truth about everything. But as for Boonie, I think his death was actually the most shocking thing in the show. When I watched his death, it caught me off guard because honestly, it was unexpected. Like, how often does a character die in Sentai? Don't answer that. However, I do wish that his death was permanent since it could have led to an interesting crossover with the King-Ohgers and Hakabaka. Though I don't know if they want to reuse the Dawn Brothers King-Ohger crossover plotline, I think that would get stale. But with his death, everything changed in the story. The team could no longer rely on Boonie to fight alongside them to take down the kaijus, leaving just Boonie to do it. However, when Boonie was out of commission due to sacrificing his life energy to try to save him, the team was kinda screwed. But thankfully Team Rocket came in and destroyed the thing. But speaking of Team Rocket, these goobers were the main part that made me want to continue watching weekly. These guys were actual idiots that played the role of Jesse James and Meowth to a T. Hell, they even pulled out crappy disguises at one point, and I found their interactions with each one of the generals to be interesting, since they hated almost every single one of the generals by the end. The only one that they liked was Mad Rex because he respected them. And at the end of the day, their story is really just a message on how as a worker you need to be treated with some sense of dignity. And towards the end, they even betrayed Spindor and decided to become the good guys and fight for themselves, and even took down one of the monsters. Now, as for the generals, I found Mad Rex to be the perfect Arc 1 enemy, as he's someone who set up a rivalry with Talia and pushed the team to get stronger and stronger. He also was the first person to name drop the BBG, but sadly his time was cut short as he was taken out quickly. But he did come back as a zombie for Disrace's experiment, which honestly was great for Talia and his rivalry, since for the whole time he was trying to figure out what was wrong with him and why he doesn't remember their fight. But sadly, in his final fight against the team, he sacrifices his own life for the Boonboomgers, leaving Team Rocket depressed. But moving on, we have Cannonberg. And I'm just gonna say it, fuck Cannonberg. He was a character we all unbiasedly hated. I mean, he was willing to let kids burn for the sake of an experiment and saw Team Rocket as worthless tools. At the end of the day, he was a mad scientist who didn't care about lives. And I was so glad when he got attacked by all the Boonboonger cars, like that was just satisfying. But I think that the best of the worst was Disrace. This guy was using an actual zombie to fight his battles. But not only that, he had a history of taking over planets like Breaky, and would incarcerate people on said planet to create gasoline hubs. But the best part about Disrace is that he progressed the story farther than any of the generals. I mean, he dropped bombshells about Boonie, his appearance sparked Gimba's true form, and he brought back Mad Rex. I think Disrace was honestly my favorite villain for just being a villain. And as for his defeat, he got taken down by the man who wanted his revenge, Gimba, which was perfection. But not as perfect as him coming back and getting a taste of his own medicine, by exploding via a bomb that Spindor put on him. But moving on, we have Grant's Risk. Now, Grant was one of the generals who really didn't do much of anything. Like, yeah, he was strong enough to take out Talia, but that's really about it. And even in his final fight, he kinda just got shafted. And you're supposed to tell me that this guy was Spindor's second in command? He literally got his ass whooped in 5 minutes. In my opinion, this guy was narratively and physically the weakest out of the generals. But now for the big bad, Spindor. I think the Michael Jackson wannabe was an alright villain. He was super powerful and definitely proved how he became a leader of a giant army that took over many planets. I think what I liked about Spindor was the fact that he didn't give a crap and was gonna get what he wanted. And in the end, he took out someone that he deemed a traitor, thus beginning his takeover. Either way, I felt like his final fight was kind of a letdown. Like, yes, the guy got a power-up from Grant's Risk, but at the same time, he was taken down by a power of friendship attack. And it was just one attack. Which, to be fair, I love the power of friendship, and I think it works well here in Boonboomger. But I really just felt like this final fight was missing something. Either way, Spindor was a decent final boss, and definitely had a personality to boot. But along the Hashilians, we had Talia's mentor and Isa, which just fuck them. Corrupt billionaires who just want to have control. That's all I'm gonna say. I hope they stay in prison. But with that out of the way, let's talk about the crossovers. And Boonboomger was crossover central. If you thought King-Ohger had a bunch of crossovers, nah, think again. Now in this Sentai, we had 3 previous Sentai teams come back in order to promote the Robo Universe toy line. But interestingly, each collab gave the team something new. The AI system for Marine and Safari were based off of Speedor. The coupling system for the Champion Mecha is based off of the coupling system for the Tokuger Mecha. And Gokai Blue brought Nicola's necklace to bring Boonie back to life. With this, their random promotion really didn't feel as jarring, except for Speedor randomly showing up to help Sakito. That really just felt out of place and honestly just felt like forced product promotion. But I'd argue that the Tokuger crossover was the best out of the 3 crossovers. I mean, I even made a whole video about just this one episode and how much I liked it. In it, they brought back not only one Tokuger, but 2 of them just for this one episode. And both had a major role in the arc and set up for the next arc. Akira showed up to help Gimba realize that he needs to stop being a lone warrior using his own experience. While Wright shows up to show the mechanics of the Tokugers while also showing off the coupling system. And that entire episode really just embraced the Tokugers' imagination theme with every aspect, including the mecha fight, which was just glorious. As for the Gokaiger and Go-Onger collabs, as a person who hasn't seen Go-Onger, I love seeing the suits and the mecha in action and definitely need to watch it. As for Gokaiger, I love the way that Joe kinda took over the role as Blue, and absolutely made his fight showy, embracing the Gokaiger spirit. Speaking of things being showy, this show is honestly really good with the action scenes. I think some of my favorite scenes are when they use the monster, a grunt, or a wall to transform by gliding the changer on him. It's honestly just way too cool. But as for the fights themselves, they are pretty damn good and very dynamic, especially episode 44. That first fight between Talia and Spindor was just absolute cinema. And they top it all off with Boomie's death. Overall, the action for Boonboomger was just a top tier experience. But with that, every show has its flaws and Boonboomger is no stranger to them. Now keep in mind these are my opinions, so if you don't see them as flaws, that's fine. Starting off, I believe Boonboomger had way too many filler episodes. Like, they had way more that needed to be done. Now obviously filler isn't bad, but when your filler takes away from actual plot progression and keeping the pace of the story, that's when it gets bad. Hell, I think we even had 2 sports theme episodes, and I normally love sports episodes, but I think we could have used one of those episodes to progress the plot. But if the filler episodes weren't bad enough, the tonal shifts were just horrible towards the end. One second the world is ending, the next everything is alright, and then the next episode the world is just on fire. Like, I understand needing a chill episode to build budget for the next, but at least sprinkle something here and there to keep us interested. And not only that, they use the same plotline 3 times where Isiro betrays the team, and 2 of those being fake outs and the third being used as a tool towards the endgame. And I'm fine with these types of episodes, but the fact that it happened 3 times in the span of 40 episodes felt like it was the only thing that they could give Isiro instead of, I don't know, showing the bond that he has with Talia. But speaking of fake outs, Boonboomger is the actual king of fake outs. And hell, even in the final preview, they faked us out with Shirabe transforming, only for her to just pop up a little image showing what Isa had done. But not only that, they had Flint's actress come back and they teased us with 2 Boon Pinks, thus meaning that Flint's actress was finally going to transform. Lastly, they teased Isiro versus Talia, which only ended up being a clone. Now this could have been seen as potential foreshadowing for later, but I don't want to get into that. But hopefully you see what I mean by this. From a weekly watching standpoint, this was just disappointing when you see all these possible great character moments just for them to be fake outs to get you to watch the show. And I know that I've already mentioned this, but Sakito definitely did get the short end of the stick this season. To me, this dude felt like he was never part of the team and he rarely showed up in any of the group roll calls. Normally he was always off taking on another villain of some sort. And even the show doesn't recognize him as a team member in the outro. There wasn't even a champion jacket for him. For a second in the season, I was wondering if I was missing something because I was wondering, where is this dude? And it's sad because this guy had been auditioning for all these different shows and was gonna give up if it wasn't for Boonboomger. But another thing missing from the entire show that was built up as this big grand deal was the BBG, aka the Big Bang Grand Prix. This was a major plot point for the story and continued to be something brought up repeatedly, and they never actually did anything with it. And I know the whole thing with it being a rigged race was a factor, but the fact that it was mentioned multiple times and then even training in the beginning for it just felt like a massive letdown. And you'd hope to see one big ultimate race in the finale of the show. My only hope now is that we get a V-Cinema for the BBG, or if this is an actual plot point for the eventual Gozyuger crossover movie. But lastly, I think that the endgame for this series was really lacking for the most part. Like, I feel 1 or 2 more episodes would have been helpful, all things considered. And after Boonie died, everything just felt like it was kicked into fast gear, and they were just like, oh crap, we have 4 episodes. It really felt like they had 4 episodes and they just speed ran towards the finish line. And together, Grant's Risk and Spindor's fights lasted roughly 10 minutes. And against Spindor, they did get blown back a couple of times, but they ultimately ended up one-shotting him. I feel like if these fights got their own dedicated episode, the endgame wouldn't have felt as rushed as it was. But overall, I think Boonboomger is a good Sentai for people who enjoy Sentai tropes. I think it pulled out every trope in the book. Friendly monster of the week, scientist villain, 6th Ranger starts out evil but gains Red's trust, father figure was evil, sports episodes, team member goes rogue. I think you get the point. This Sentai was just made for people who enjoy Sentai tropes, which for me, I do enjoy most Sentai tropes. So regardless of the setbacks mentioned earlier, I really did enjoy Boonboomger. Overall, it's definitely not my favorite Sentai season, but it's definitely not the worst season. And I definitely think I'll rewatch it eventually. But now we head into number 1 Sentai Gozyuger next week, and I hope you guys are just as excited as I am. And I'll definitely be making a video on the first episode, so make sure to subscribe with notifications on. And if you haven't already, go ahead and smash that like button down below and give me your thoughts on Boonboomger in the comments down below. And with that, I'm gonna get the heck out of here. I'm Foul Plays, and I'm out. Peace.